Hello there! Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week, along with special guest Craig Dickinson, we will be doing a deep dive into Raiders of the Lost Ark in anticipation for the release of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Before we get started, I'm inviting you to join the conversation with us. We can be found on Twitter and Hive at Force Ghost Pod. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok just by searching Force Ghost Conversations. Also, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your listening site of choice. Plus, Force Ghost Conversations is live on Patreon. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Finally, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it's time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. All right, everybody, welcome back to another incredible installment of Force Ghost Conversations. And I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with Craig, starting our Indiana Jones coverage here on the podcast. So yes, as you can probably surmise, we'll be doing weekly here episodes about all the remaining films in the Indiana Jones franchise, including Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and all of that will be leading up to, of course, the Dial of Destiny, which we will be doing full extensive coverage over as the film releases at the end of June. Also, I mean, it's great that the timeliness of this episode comes out because I believe at the same time that it's slated to be released, the Indiana Jones films will be released on Disney Plus, which is really cool. So if you haven't watched Raiders yet, now is actually a good time to pause the episode, go watch it on Disney Plus or buy it on 4K or whatever. And then you can come back and watch it, or you can come back to this episode having watched it and have a fresh experience and keep up with all the conversation points that we're going to be making here in this episode. So, of course, Craig comes to us from the Reading Between the Reels podcast, where he's one of the hosts there. And it's a show that I have been on several times and hope to be on many times in the future. So be sure to go support that podcast, of course, and Craig will tell you all the places where you can find him online in this in the upcoming discussion on the other side of this break here. So typically this is where I would do Cloud City Gossip, but full disclosure, I am currently in Mexico at the time of the release of this episode. So we pre-recorded all this stuff. And since I don't know the news that will be coming out over the past week before leading up to this episode, I do not have the clairvoyance to do so. There will be no Cloud City Gossip in this week's episode. We will cover all that news in the following week's episode. So if I missed out on anything, that will be covered and at a later date and time with full details and all that shared with you as usual. So with that, folks, we will be right back on the other side of this very short break with our conversation about Raiders of the Lost Ark. All right, everyone, welcome back to another installment of Force Ghost Conversations, and it's time for Indiana Jones talk on this podcast, and I could think of no better person to bring onto this program to talk about the first film of this incredible franchise, Raiders of the Lost Ark, than none other than our good friend, Craig Dickinson of the Reading Between the Reels podcast. Craig, how are you doing?
Anthony, I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be on your show and talk Raiders tonight.
Absolutely. This is a phenomenal movie. It's a great way to get into the Indiana Jones season as Dial of Destiny is just around the corner. And to start, I just want to start at the beginning here. What are your earliest memories with this movie? Did you see it in a theater? What was the hype like at the time? Take us back to the 80s.
So I'm not quite as old as you're intimating. No, first time I saw it was on VHS.
Okay, great.
So it was at home, probably 83, I think, 83, maybe early 84. So I don't remember the theatrical hype at all. What I remember is I loved Star Wars, grew up on Star Wars, and this was presented to me by my parents as, hey, this is kind of connected to Star Wars. And I don't know if they dropped Lucas's name or Harrison Ford's name or not, but it was definitely hinted to me that, hey, you like Star Wars, you'll like this too. They had previously seen it, so that's how it was introduced to me.
Yeah, was it did you buy it on the VHS, or was it a nice Blockbuster or wherever rental store that you had around you at the time? Was that a Friday night rental?
Yeah, I'm sure it was a mom and pop place, but nice. Yeah, it was something we rented. Had to rent the VCR too. We didn't own a VCR at the time. Really? Oh yeah, no, you get the big old case and figure out how to set it up, and oh yeah, I have vague recollections of it, but I know that it happened in our living room in Cottonwood, of all places, which is where I lived at that time. Yeah.
That's amazing. I couldn't imagine that whole like setting up the VCR every time you wanted to watch a movie. Could you imagine that nowadays with like, let's say like a 4K player, someone renting it and then
nope, every time. It's quite an ordeal.
Man, the convenience of having streaming services right built into our smart TVs is just something that we should never overlook.
No, never.
And then finding channel 3 or whatever channel it's supposed to work on. Yep. And gosh, I can only imagine. Well, you already got into like my next question here, which was in the 80s, you know, it sounds like your parents were ahead of the curve on this one and like kind of getting you to watch the film. They were like, all right, it's a little bit of Star Wars, you know, it's got some people behind it that were into the making of this film. So as we know nowadays, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, this is a collaboration between them. I mean, how aware of you were that at the time beyond that? And even since then, how has that impacted your anticipation and love of this film, frankly?
So as far as aware at the time, like I said, it was probably pretty small. I think I might have seen part of Close Encounters on TV, and that might have been my only experience with Spielberg. I hadn't seen Jaws at that point, even though it had come out. Wow. It's a little too scary to be for like maybe a 7-year-old. Yeah, but yeah, at this point now, it's like you have these two masters that have come together, and it's legendary how they're sitting on the beach in Hawaii, and you know, Spielberg says, "I want to do a James Bond film," and Lucas is like, "I can do you one better. Let's do this." So yeah, it is. It's two guys at the top of their game, and it's a perfect movie in my opinion. It really is. Just they put everything into it, and lightning struck for this film.
Absolutely. You said it already. That Hawaii story is just it just adds to the mythology of this movie, the aura of it, right? They're celebrating these incredible successes of or thinking that they're gonna, you know, they're trying to avoid whatever is happening at the time, like with the release of Star Wars and Close Encounters. They're trying to, you know, to figure out if it's going to be successful or not. They're a little bit worried. That's why they're kind of escaping it all. And then they create this out of that, this incredible adventure series based off of the movies they saw as a kid, and then channeling that into the future. And frankly, it is just, as you said, it is a perfect film. I think I go back and forth all the time with the question of what movie would I, if I could only watch one movie for the rest of my, like say I'm on a desert island, right? And if I can only have one movie for the rest of my life, what would I watch? And I go back and forth all the time between it's either Raiders or it's Jaws.
Yeah.
And I think today, you know, ask me the question on a different day, but for me, it might be Raiders at any given moment. It's not, I wouldn't say Star Wars because Star Wars begs a sequel. I think at the end of A New Hope, you know, you want to see the Empire Strike. You want to see where the story goes after that. Vader's still floating out in space, and you're like, there's more to tell here. And the Empire still exists. It's not defeated entirely. But at the end of the day, Raiders, from start to finish, is a complete story. It doesn't beg a sequel. In fact, the sequel is a prequel.
Exactly.
So all the characters are there, they're fleshed out, but there's nuances within each of these characters that you're able to, each time I'm able to pick up something new, something different. You hear the score a little bit differently. The set designs, everything about this film, there's a new experience that I take from it each and every time I watch it. Does it have the same, you know, do you have a similar experience, or even is it your desert island film?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And it definitely could be, because it, like you mentioned, it is self-contained. Like that's one of the big selling points of it, but the characters are so well drawn, and it's, you know, it strikes a balance between horror and, you know, comedy and drama and romance. It has a little bit of everything in it.
Absolutely.
It still holds up. And even though I know pretty much beat for beat what's going to happen, I don't care, because I'm looking forward to the next part. You know, it's there are certain movies where I just, oh, this is my favorite part. Oh wait, no, this is my favorite part. Oh no, wait, I forgot this other part's coming up. That's right. And continually as I'm watching the film, I'm just enjoying the ride. Like it's a very familiar roller coaster that I've been on. Exactly. That I still enjoy, still get the adrenaline pumping when I watch it.
Exactly. And maybe one day I'll get out to Disneyland Paris where they have an Indiana Jones roller coaster out there where I can really experience the roller coaster in real life, but maybe one day. All right, Craig, I alluded to you backstage that we're going to be playing a little game here. And I've never shared this experience with anybody, any of our listeners, so this is going to be fresh to all of us here. We're going to play a game of when I watched this movie for the first time.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to give you some background here too. All right. You know I love Star Wars. It's my bread and butter franchise. It's what I go to all the time, right? So I know Lucas. I love Jaws. I love Spielberg. All that stuff. Been watching their films since I was 5 or so, right? Okay. I'm a big history buff too. So I went to college for my undergrad degree in history. My first couple of jobs outside of college and all my internships were at historical sites. So this is a blend of my love of Lucas, Spielberg, and history all together in one. When do you think I saw this movie for the first time?
Oh, wow.
And I'll tell you, I am 28 now. So,
okay.
take a stab when I saw this for the first time.
I'm gonna take a shot, and I'm gonna say you were 20.
That's about as close as you're gonna get. I was 21 when I saw this for the first time.
What's the story there?
I have no idea why, but like my mom was very strict about me seeing certain films as a kid for some reason. Like, it makes absolutely no sense where she drew the line, right? So like, I was able to see like Saving Private Ryan at the age of 8. I watched
Letters.
Yeah, I watched Letters from Iwo Jima in the movie theater. I was seeing rated R films with her in the movie, in the theater. Like we'd rent videos, like 300 and all that stuff. Like I was 12 at the time. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, there are certain films like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Batman '89, Superman '78. I only saw these films, Craig, when I was 21. And I don't know why. She just drew her heels in the sand or something like that and said, "Oh, this isn't for you. You can watch it when you're older," or something like that. I really and a little bit of revisionist history. If you ever ask her, she's like, "I never did that." Okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. So yeah, basically my first experience watching this, I was in college. It was my the spring semester of my junior year. And a plug for college library systems. They have a ton of DVDs there. If any of our listeners are in college or they're close to the local college, they can get access to a library card if you're looking for ways to find films that you've never seen before. And I was a Saturday night, and of course, as one does in college, they go to the library and rent a DVD for a film they've never seen before, and then pop that in. And let me tell you, Craig, it was a life-changing experience watching that movie. I mean, like I said, all the things were there that I knew I would love. And through that experience, it was a before and after. I was changed by this. It became quickly one of my favorite movies of all time. I became obsessed with with this movie and with the franchise overall. Like I am Indiana Jones to the T at this point in my life. I've seen this movie just about as many times as you could imagine. I've just keep popping it in and learning more and more about it. But yeah, that's the journey that I have for this film. For whatever reason, I missed. I was alive during King of the Crystal Skull when it came out in theaters. I never saw it in theaters. No one ever was like, "Let's go see it." I think my grandpa saw it and he was like, "You should go see it." And then my mom really dug her feet in the ground and said, "Nope, he's not." I have no idea why.
Yeah.
We even had the Batman '89 VHS at home, and she was like, "Nope, you're not watching this."
That is interesting.
I got nothing.
I've had
I'll mess with her about this later on because I have to see her this weekend for my graduation. I'll say you're going to be talked about in an upcoming podcast.
So that's interesting. So most of us, around our age have saw it as kids, but you didn't see it until an adult. So it's interesting that you have a very different perspective on it, but still came to it in a way that was, yes, this is just amazing regardless.
Absolutely.
You don't have nostalgia glasses on or anything.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
knowing it's, it's still a 35-year-old film that holds up tremendously,
Yeah.
right? There are literally few aspects of this film where I'm like, "Yep, that's dated." And I think it helps too that it's already set in the 30s.
Absolutely.
It's not set in present day 1981, which automatically dates it. It was kind of dated in the 80s, 50 years by the time, and I will say it's an era of history that I study predominantly, in the World War II time period itself and all that. And it's a harken back to nostalgia based films of the 30s that Lucas and Spielberg were into at the time. They're just channeling that through their own prism, and it works. It works, like you said. It's a perfect film. So with that, we've already said that it's as close to a perfect film, if not being a perfect film, as it could be. But I would even say that Raiders of the Lost Ark is really heralded as the start of the modern action film. In your opinion, is it the gold standard for movies of this genre? I know you cover a lot on your podcast, various action films of all different shapes and sizes. Where does it, fit among that canon?
So that was an interesting question. I actually put it in the adventure column
Okay.
because so for me, the best action movie of all time is Die Hard. That's how I
That's
define
a
an
good one.
action movie. Adventure is where I put Indiana Jones. I think mainly because of the multiple locales,
Okay.
the quest type of setup of the film.
Gotcha.
And it is absolutely the apex of that. I mean, it's interesting, especially this time watching through, like how much it does feel like a Bond movie, especially, it's
Mm,
got the opening part with Belloc and the Jovitos and everything. And
yes.
like, it's completely disconnected from the rest of the film, except for the
Mhm.
fact that Belloc's in it and all the locales. It feels like a Bond film. And so it's
Yeah.
like the best Bond film is this film is Raiders. But
Honestly.
so many other films after, from National Treasure to Tomb Raider to, just pick one. Anytime that you're going from place to place, it's
Mhm, mhm.
trying to get to where Raiders is.
Yeah.
Even the
Yeah.
other Indiana Jones movies are, in my opinion.
I mean, sure. They're trying to get to that same point. I think you make a fair point. It is very much an adventure film, for sure. I think my brain always sees ET as the ultimate adventure film. So
Cool.
I never can put them on the same like plane in regards to that. So I guess that's where I'm thinking action film. But
I mean, it's got tons of
in
great
my
action set
opinion,
pieces in it for
yeah,
sure.
exactly. If you're not, I don't think you get Die Hard if you don't have Raiders of the
Sure.
Lost Ark first. And then I don't know if there's a film before Raiders that gets to that same point then that sets up the stepping stones, if you will, maybe other than A New Hope.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard. I can't off the top of my head think of a film in the 70s or early 60s beforehand that gets to that point. So um, it's fascinating because yeah, it really sets this stage of here are action set pieces. Here are where our hero is going to encounter this. Here's where the villain is introduced, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really set kind of in the way the formula that you get for a lot of these different types of action and adventure films, as you mentioned earlier. So that's a good point on that one. I really like that. Um, but I think this movie is nothing without Harrison Ford at the center of it all. And in your estimation, personally, what is it about Harrison Ford's performance that makes Indiana Jones such a unique and memorable character in the pop culture zeitgeist?
So more than anything, I would say his weaknesses,
Mm,
his humanity is what
yeah.
makes him um, so unique and memorable. The
Mhm.
fact, just we get right from the beginning, we see him afraid of snakes and then
Yep.
having to deal with that. We see him getting hurt repeatedly. There's a great line about, it's not the years, it's the mileage.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
these things we see, we see him go through so many things, and he's not a Superman. He's not invulnerable, and so you immediately empathize with him. And it's different than a John Wayne or some of these other stereotypical, for lack of a better word, action heroes from the past.
Sure.
He's kind of the first one. And to go back to Die Hard, that's kind of what it is with John McClane too.
Yeah.
Like seeing him get hurt that's very different. It's not Rambo. It's not Schwarzenegger. And I think it's that same kind of thing, that humanity where there's, you see Indiana Jones grieving over Marion.
Hmm. Hmm.
He hurts emotionally
Oh
too.
yeah.
So, it's a very nuanced performance, even though he's, you know, total badass in certain scenes. He also has he has multiple sides, multifaceted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to the John McClane point, you see him bleeding, right? You see
Yep.
he's stepping on glass, right? That's not a lot of action heroes, as you mentioned, Schwarzenegger, Stallone. They're not showing these sides of them that are showing that they have weaknesses, right? And I think Indiana Jones really sets up that archetype character that we see later on. Yeah, I mean, Harrison just brings such a gravitas to this character. He the outfit of Indiana Jones itself is so iconic, but I don't think anyone else wearing that outfit works as much as Harrison Ford. Like, I've been seeing all these behind the scenes features of like Tom Selleck wearing it and other people potentially that could have been Indiana Jones, and they were doing their darndest to not have Harrison be in the role, and then finally like, all right, we'll do it. They had to almost reluctantly agree to what was already presented in front of them. He just the way that his dictation of how he does the performance too, I mean, it just works. Everything about his performance, the choices that he makes, right? I think of that, you say the grieving scene, right, where he's literally just drowning his sorrows away, and then Belloc comes in to ruse him up a bit there. I mean, just everything about what he does in this movie just works. And I like too, again, the fallibility of the character. One of my favorite bits of this film, and I think John Williams plays the cue tremendously here, is in the fight sequence with Pat Roach. And Indy sees this larger German mechanic coming to him, about maybe 2.5 times his size, more muscle than man, and you just hear the Indiana Jones theme faintly in the background, as if he's like, I know.
Yep.
How am I going to get myself out of this one? Somehow he does. And I like that. Again, if we talk about the music here, it's also in the same vein where this character, we already know what we're getting out of Indiana Jones. I think the music helps give us that too. There's no it's not like Superman 78, right, where he earns the theme, right? He goes through his arc where he gets to the point where he discovers the Fortress of Solitude. He learns about what it is to be human, what it is to be a Kryptonian, how it is to be Superman at the end of the day. And then he earns the suit, he earns the cape, he's able to fly and have that first flight, and he's off being Superman. That's when you hear the Superman theme really for the first time. Indiana Jones, you hear it in the first cold open sequence, which I find to be, he doesn't have to earn it along the way. It's a cue to the audience that this is your hero right here from the start. And I think Harrison does a great job. I want to get your thoughts on this one here too, where this character is, obviously you have to draw similarities to Han Solo. What do you think are the differences between Indiana Jones and Han Solo at the end of the day, if there are any?
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably make an argument that they're very similar characters.
Yeah, no, they are in certain ways. I think, honestly, I think Indiana Jones is a lot smarter than Han Solo.
Yeah.
He is, and that's another thing. Talk about multifaceted. He's an intellectual. He's a teacher. He's a college professor. He's an expert in archaeology, and also somehow an action hero at the same time. So he has these two sides that collide, which is fantastic. And so, yeah, I think, the sense of humor, the wry sense of humor is very similar. The manliness aspect and willing to just run headlong into certain things, like you see, he's reckless too. In certain aspects, sometimes he's very careful, and then sometimes he's not, much like Han. But yeah, if I had to draw a line there, I'd say it's the intelligence and just the book knowledge. He kind of has that as almost like a superpower.
Agreed. And if I can yes and you to that point too, I think Han has a reluctance to join a cause, whereas Indy he's like, get me on a plane. I need to get the Ark before the Germans get it. Rather, where Han would be like, I don't need to get involved.
True.
That's where they draw the line there. Indy knows exactly what he needs to do, and then Han gets there eventually, but different arcs, different characters. So great stuff. So this film is full of memorable scenes. We've talked about a few already, but what would you say is the best action set piece from this movie?
Yeah, it's the truck.
The truck sequence,
hands down, the truck sequence. And it's hard at this point to kind of quantify how great it is, because like I've shown that to students in a film class that I taught, and try and explain, this is not CGI.
Yeah.
That is an actual guy hanging off the back of that truck and climbing, getting pulled underneath.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Like these scenes are done so easily now in a computer that you just assume that that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like, I'm just not, I wish I could not know that CGI existed just so I could appreciate, because I remember as a kid just being blown away at that sequence and watching him getting pulled and pulling himself underneath the truck, and just that whole sequence. And the music is great. These running guys off the road. You got the Wilhelm scream. It has a little bit of everything that you'd like from there. You see the guy, there's kind of foreshadowing because he crawls underneath, and then the other guy tries to do it too, and he gets run over.
Mm-hmm.
And then they pull into the bazaar, and the roof comes down, and it's over. So it has everything. I just
everything,
love it.
Indeed. And what I love is you said it's not CG'd. It is very much so stunt coordination and visual practical effects. Right, Harrison is literally being dragged on the sand. Right? A truck drags him for a little bit of sequence in that film. That is confirmed by some of the back documentary material that I've seen leading up to this episode. It is just, it's wonderful. It's really beautiful. I don't think I've seen stunt work this well choreographed and executed. John Wick probably is the next film I can think of that does it this well. And of course, I think I would even argue the warehouse scene from BVS also does that to a wonderful degree too. But talk about through the course of an entire film with John Wick and the subsequent sequels too. This sequence, I was already in love with the film by the time we got to this point.
Yeah.
But how could you not just be sitting on the edge of your seat? The pacing, the editing, it's all there. And then of course, this film, a little bit of the creation of it is the fact that they did this film for $20 million, a very, minuscule budget, according to Spielberg and Lucas. So that meant that they had to be scrappy when it came to putting this movie together. They only would take like 3 shots of a single take before they moved on. It was gritty, storyboarded so much. They knew what they were doing every day, and they tried to match up everything so much to the storyboards that they had that they planned for the dailies of the day. So much so that even at the end, when they get to the bazaar, Tote's not even there. He's just a hat on a stick. I love it. Yeah. These are the things that you don't get in films anymore, that people would roll their eyes at and say, like, this is terrible, how could you let this pass in a film? But there's just something about the charm of that works, right?
Yeah. Well, it's very similar to like, Spielberg's experience with Jaws. It's like the shark didn't work, and so how do we get around that?
You edit and you pivot, right?
Yep.
It works.
It's almost like guerrilla filmmaking.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's literally Indiana Jones, in making the movie, right? Indiana Jones is a character that pivots all the time. I don't know, I'm making this up as I go. Right? He finds a horse and he takes down this entire truck caravan. Exactly. He had no plan whatsoever, and he just kind of made it up as he's going along the way. And frankly, Spielberg and Lucas, through the brilliance of their filmmaking craft, made this film work. With the help of course, a lot of great people along the way. Lawrence Kasdan's excellent script, ILM doing special effects, Harrison Ford's amazing performance, Karen Allen, all the number of great people behind the scenes making this film. But I love that sequence, and I will give two shout outs to some of my other favorite sequences of this movie, which of course I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say the cold open with the fertility idol, and of course the giant ball chasing Indy out of the temple. They made a whole stunt adventure show in Disney World about this thing, so like it's clearly had an impact on the world and pop culture. I think most people would probably think about Indiana Jones, and that's probably one of the first images that they think of is him running away from the big boulder ball coming after him.
Exactly. And that's basically like a short film. Like it is. It would be perfect just like that, just those first 10-15 minutes.
It absolutely is. It's almost 2 movies, right? You get dropped at the third act of Indiana Jones 0.5, and then he goes to college. Raiders of the Lost Ark starts, right? Or he's on the plane. He goes back to the college that he teaches at, which I would love to be a student in his class. I think he probably doesn't teach very often.
No.
He's like, I'm going to be in my office for office hours on Thursday. No, he's not.
No.
He's not going to be there. He's not. He's canceling class next week. You're not reading Mickelson chapters 4 and 5 next week. Trust me, you're not. It's not happening. Don't read the book. Don't even buy the book. You're not even. Probably the easiest A you can take in college. But the other sequence I think is really awesome, just for, again, the visual effects of it all, is the barf sequence in Nepal.
Yes.
I think that one just rocks, the way that they're able to get the flames going.
He lifts his head up at the last second.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Whiskey. It's not
perfect every time. They go to that like bird's eye view. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
So great.
Tote picks up the staff of the headpiece, and it's on fire. He goes into the sand, the snow, and shoves his hand in. I love it. Everything about that sequence just rocks. So again, film with so many great action set pieces. We could talk about them for a while. But I mentioned a little bit about ILM and their work with this film. This is, I believe, Spielberg's first collaboration with ILM, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that their work at the end of this film is just astounding, especially with the opening of the Ark. What was your experience seeing faces literally melt for the first time?
Yeah, I have to think back quite a bit because
take us back to VHS.
I'm probably 7, and I know that I watched it, and I might have been pretty scared about it at the time. The 80s was a weird time. There was a lot of, this is pre PG-13 even, so we watched a lot of stuff. I didn't see this one in the theater. I did see Temple of Doom in the theater as a second grader. I remember that. Yeah, the heart coming. Yeah, I mean, what was my mom thinking? I don't know. Yeah, your mom and my mom should have had a conversation, balance these things out. Yeah, I don't honestly remember. I know that this is what I will say is that I've showed it to my kids a few years back, and that's the one part I won't let them see.
Oh, okay.
Is the face melting thing. They can watch all the rest of it, but during that part, I'm going to close your eyes because that's a little intense. And even though, and that, again, talking about the effects that still hold up. And I've seen the behind the scenes. I know with the vacuum thing and all, how they made the face, but I don't care. It's so creepy and good. It works.
I couldn't agree more. You want to know how they made the sauce, and then you know how they made the sauce, and you're like, great, give me more of the spaghetti.
Exactly.
I can't explain it anymore. I will sit and watch Light and Magic, the great documentary about ILM, regularly just to see this sequence and how they put it together. They melted faces.
Yeah.
And of course, I believe Belloc's faces explodes.
Yep.
The other German commander, his face implodes kind of, and then just poor Tote gets it. The worst of all of them, I would say.
And you got demon angel ghost thingies or whatever those are flying around, and
who knows? Just don't look at it. Don't look at it.
Just don't look. Lightning comes out and kills them all.
I mean, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. ILM. I don't know, Craig. It might be one of my favorite effects that ILM has ever done.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else right off the top of my head that matches the caliber and the meaning of what they've done with this sequence, because it takes out the villain at the end of the day. And it shows the difference of Indiana Jones and Belloc, where Belloc can't not look at it.
Mm.
Indiana Jones says, I cannot look at it. That shows the two differences of them. Belloc's telling him the entire time, you're one bad day from being me. Right. We're two sides of the same coin. We're just passing through history here. And then Indy's like, no, I'm not you. I'm not you. I serve, I have my own reasons for doing this. I'm trying to just collect artifacts for a museum so that they can be studied and we can go about our days and become better people about all this stuff. Whereas he's trying to sell stuff on the black market and to the highest bidder and all that. I mean, God, what a time. But yeah, I love that sequence. It's almost midnight here our time, but I may put it on just to
watch it again. Yeah,
watch it again because it's magical. It is true movie magic at its best.
Agreed.
I all that whole sequence, the Ark, then shooting up into the sky, coming back in, closing itself up. I mean,
the sound design, that just very final close of the arc to all the banging of the lid coming down. All of it is just
yes. I've learned today what the actual sound is.
Oh.
That is the actual opening and closing of the arc, or at least the lid of it. Would you like to know?
Yes, of course.
It is Ben Burt in his bathroom taking off the back lid from his toilet.
I think I knew that, and thank you for bringing that back. Because now that I hear that, I'll never unhear it.
I'll never unhear it as well.
Of course it is.
That's again, funny. I want to know this stuff. I want to know every bit in detail about this movie. I may have to pick up J.W. Rinsler's book about the making of every Indiana Jones film up to this point to fully immerse myself in every absolute detail of this movie whatsoever. Well, Craig, we've talked at length about this movie. Of course, we've talked about the why. We've talked about Indiana Jones. We've talked about our favorite action beats. We've talked about a little bit about the characters, the making of this film, the special effects. The biggest thing that I've learned from the internet about this movie over the last couple of years is this great debate that a lot of people have, which I think is baloney.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that Indiana Jones does not affect the plot of this movie. Do you have any thoughts on that matter as we conclude up here today?
Yeah, that's just silly.
It is.
So here's the thing, and there's a couple of key things. There's probably others, but the biggest one I go to is the Nazis don't know where the headpiece is.
Exactly, they don't
at all.
They're digging just in the wrong places.
They have no idea, and that's why you see Toht on the airplane following Indiana Jones.
Yes.
Because Indy doesn't even know where Abner is. He's going to try and find Marion, and maybe that'll lead him to they don't have a clue. They don't even know to do that.
They just got lucky by finding Tanis.
Yeah. Exactly. If that wasn't the case, then they would have already found Marion, already killed her, already took it.
Yep. They would have combed the desert and then still not found.
Spaceballs reference.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have that. Now that's the big one. And then the other one is I'm sure there's others, but one thing that occurred to me too is at the end, like the only reason that arc ends up in Area 51, as we know from Indy 4, is because Indy was on that island. If he's not there, other Nazis are going to recover that thing. Sure. Because that's a secret Nazi base.
You're absolutely right. That's eventually going to be found.
Yeah.
Maybe it gets eventually found.
Maybe. But the only reason but the only way it ends up in that warehouse is because Indy's there.
Yep, absolutely.
So at least it's taken off the board.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, any way you spin it, I think Indiana Jones affects this every way you think about it, right? Because also, if that's on the plane, that goes to Germany right away. Right? Yep. They don't find it on, they don't take a U-boat to go find this random pirate ship in the middle of the Mediterranean.
Yep.
And then they're like, well, I guess we might as well see what we got here before we take it to the Fuhrer.
That's an excellent point. I've not heard that one. That's brilliant. That's absolutely right.
So, I mean, for better or for worse, maybe it would have been better if they take it to Germany and they open up and then who knows? Maybe it affects the plot wrongly in that way, but
it still affected it, though.
It still affects it one way or the other. I mean, this movie doesn't progress the way that it does unless Indiana Jones is where he is and does what he does.
Exactly.
I mean, I think that's a mic drop right there. There's no other way you can spin this movie. Indiana Jones is pivotal to this movie. Yes. Now, I will actually pick your brain about one last thing in this movie, and it comes back to the title, which is a fun, I don't know if it's revisionist history, etc. Of course, when this movie comes out in 81, it is Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I believe somewhere in the 90s, with VHS releases or DVD releases, it somehow becomes Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Is Indy one of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, or is he just a guy defeating the Raiders of the Lost Ark? What are we doing here with this title changes?
Yeah, see, I've always read him as one of them.
I think he is. It's the Raiders March.
Yeah. There's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and I will never refer to it as Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. No, it's Raiders.
Yeah, I looked at
I'll
my
probably just call it Raiders.
I think I just call it Raiders too. I looked at my 4K disc and I literally saw it right there. Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
okay, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. We've done this before. Yeah.
Done it before, maybe it won't be the last time. We'll see.
That's a good point.
Well, that's all the questions I had, Craig. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say about this movie before we closed out here? Feel free to also plug anything else that you would like at this time too.
No, I love this movie. It's like I've said multiple times, it's basically a perfect movie. I could throw this on at any point, or if I see that it's airing, I will sit and watch it, because even though I know it's going to happen, it's still entertaining. It's great.
Agreed. Well, Craig, where can the fine folks who are listening to the podcast find you on their podcast airwaves?
Yeah, so Reading Between the Reels, we're everywhere you listen to podcasts. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Mainly, I'm most active on Twitter. And then we have new episodes drop every other Wednesday. And by the time this airs, our most recent episode will probably be Transformers. We've recently done... we've been doing a lot of just kind of previewing summer movies, like doing the first film in a series. So the one before that was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which we're very excited about. And we did a Guardians of the Galaxy episode with Adam Bray. That was a lot of fun.
Nice.
And then, of course, coming up very soon, we have getting ready for The Flash. We have Zack Snyder's Justice League featuring yourself. We're super excited about doing that as we look forward to what was the closest thing we may ever get to a sequel to that film in The Flash.
Yeah, I mean, it's, maybe one day. I have a fool's hope for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I cannot wait. You think you're excited for talking about that movie? I put it in because SnyderCon was a few weeks ago, and
yes,
I watched all 3 of the Snyderverse trilogy films that are released up to this point in celebration of that weekend. And man, I guess I was starting to take down notes right then and there. I knew this podcast was coming, and listeners, be ready. It's coming. We got a lot to talk about. There's 4 hours of great stuff, and we'll see how much we get into however long that episode is.
We'll see.
Yep. Well, Craig, thank you so much for coming on the show. We will certainly have you back on again in the future to talk about some other fun stuff in the Star Wars Lucasfilm galaxy as it expands and contrasts and does all the fun stuff that we'll do over the next couple of years. So thanks again for coming on the show. And to our listeners at home, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back very soon with another podcast coming into your feeds. And until then, may the Force be with you. Take care.